for Democracy and Development. I'm using this opportunity to welcome you to our stakeholders briefing on INEC's preparedness for the rescheduled elections slated for Saturday, 23rd February, and also to take a look at the political context in the last 1 week. You are welcome, and I'll hand over on the table with me. On the table with me is Professor Adele Jinadu, who is not just emeritus professor and professor of professors, but he's also had opportunity to work at the Electoral Commission, and on several occasions have consulted for electoral management bodies across Africa. And Prof is credited for having written the only review of electoral management bodies in Africa by the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa in 2011, I think, yes. And with me is also my colleague, Dr. Jumoke Yakub Aliso from the Babcock University. I earlier introduced her that Dr. Jumoke is not just an academic, but for us at the CDD is our most recent work on the review of smart card readers since its introduction that's most interests us. And this is not just an academic review, but it's in terms of the technical functioning of the card reader to elicit trends. On the side is an activist. Today is wearing the CDD cap. Is Dayo Olaide, one of our analysts, also is an activist, just short from the CLO days, Civil Liberties Organization. So on that note, I'll hand over the mic to Professor Jinadu, who will start with the reading of what we have prepared. By the end of today, of course, not the end of today, within 1 hour, we also circulate these briefings to all participants and those that are out of this, that did not participate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Hidayat, and let me join you in welcoming you all to this briefing. The briefing will be in 2 parts. The first part will be read by me. The report we have will be read by me, and the second half will be read by Jumoke. Let me also emphasize that this is a work in progress, and as we are talking now, there are developments, so I think we need to put that in that context. But within the information available to us, we feel confident to say what we are saying in the 2 presentations we are going to make. So let me begin with the first part. Reports. Last week, less than 6 hours to the presidential and national assembly elections on February 16, 2019, INEC announced its decision to postpone the elections by a week, citing logistical challenges. Presidential and parliamentary elections were shifted to February 23, and gubernatorial and state house of assembly elections to March 2, from March 2 to March 9. Outbursts of disbelief, anger, frustration, and resignation hovered around the country like here. Political parties took turns to lambast INEC of being incompetent before forming conspiracy theories. Civil society groups and election observer missions called for calm and caution while charging INEC to stick to the new election date and ensure that materials already deployed are secured. Ahead of the presidential and national assembly elections on Saturday, February 23, the CDD deployed its observers and experts on the field, conducted focus group discussions, and interviewed stakeholders to gather and filter information. The aim being to critically assess the political climate and INEC's preparations based on facts, discuss challenges, spell out implications, and offer recommendations. On the state of preparedness, in line with the demands of civil society groups and foreign election observers that INEC should provide regular updates to the public in the wake of the last-minute postponement, the Commission has lived up to its expectations by informing the public through different channels, including social media, media appearances on TV and radio, and most importantly, INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu has been holding daily briefings since Monday, 18 February 2019. During the latest briefing yesterday, Professor Yakubu told the media that the Commission has been able to configure 100% of about 180,000 smart card readers nationwide. It is necessary to reconfigure the smart card reader to reflect the new dates for the elections. By extension, the chairman said INEC has identified 6 areas subsumed under 3 broad categories: deployment of materials, movement of personnel, and reconfiguration of smart card readers that the Commission has been working on to ensure voting happens as planned. He said he complied with the directive to invite stakeholders to the central bank to assess the retrieved materials initially deployed last week and to witness to the batching of materials according to local government areas. The chairman of the Commission says sensitive materials have been moved to the 36 states across the country, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. According to INEC, Adamawa, Anambra, Benue, Ekiti, Jigawa, Katsina, Osun, Ogun, Oyo, and Taraba states have all started moving materials to local government areas as of yesterday, that is February 20. It hopes to complete the deployment of sensitive materials before the end of today, February 21. Additionally, all registration area centers, RACs, will be activated by 9 a.m. on Friday, February 22, 2019, and retraining of ad hoc election staff is now scheduled for Friday, February 22, 2019. Election staff are expected to move to their areas of assignment on Friday, the 22nd of February also. Despite these claims, we have reports that there are some missing or misplaced sensitive materials. In several instances, materials meant for particular geopolitical zones are making their way to different geopolitical zones or mixed up within geopolitical zones. For example, materials for Southwest made its way to the South-South, Northwest to Southwest, among several others. INEC, we believe, must ensure that before Saturday, all the missing or misplaced materials are rerouted to avoid shortfalls or any issues. Speaking of kits and tax observers, we found out that in regard to kits and tax observers, we found out that the kits and tags are available, but observers sometimes have to wait for too long to receive them. And what's more, these kits are being rationed, perhaps an indication that the Commission did not produce enough to go around everybody. Some election observers and journalists reported that they received jackets without caps, while some got caps without jackets, for example. It is also important to note that the INEC resident electoral commissioners have been embarking on confidence-building mechanisms, largely through reassurances on radio and television stations of the Commission's readiness for Saturday's voting. While this will increase people's confidence in the system, the measure is not evenly spread across the country, at least not with some states recording little or no efforts to get voters' confidence back. So, drawing on Professor Yakubu's briefings as well as verified information from thousands of observers on the field, we believe that the Electoral Commission is ready for Saturday's vote, and observers continue to report readiness as of yesterday, February 20. However, this does not belie the fact that there is a great deal of work to be done, including ensuring the issues concerning every aspect of logistics, as well as the movement of materials and personnel from local government areas to wards are completed without any further delay. We have to point out also that there is some element of worry nationwide about whether elections will hold or not, particularly as we consider the enormous amount of tax before the Electoral Commission and how a combination of insecurity and political violence are conspiring to further impair preparations. Nonetheless, we believe and we hope that the INEC will be able to conduct a hitch-free elections on election day. So, Jumoke will now continue from there.
Thank you. Issues related to the welfare and security of adult staff.
Okay, yes.
With respect to the welfare and security of adult staff, we note that tens of thousands of graduates under the National Youth Service Corps scheme were deployed last week to serve in different capacities on the election day, including as presiding officers, assistant presiding officers, and so on. Usually they're entitled to a training allowance of 4,500 naira after a 3-day training to prepare them for their duties on election day. In total, they would normally receive 30,500 naira for election duty. Now, though INEC claims that it prioritizes the welfare and security of youth corps members, saying that mattresses, toiletries, water, light, and security were provided at each rack last Friday, we have found from our focus group discussions and reports that there is evidence to contradict these claims. What we find are reports about corps members sleeping in the open fields in the cold, relying on their mobile phones for lights, as we saw in the media. In Ilorin, the capital of Kwara State, corps members had to protest before they got their allowances. Hundreds of election ad hoc staff posted to Ushongo local government area of Benue also protested the delay in paying their transport allowance on February 16, last week, before they eventually got paid, as well as in Kano State. In some states, youth corps members had to cater for their own transportation to local government areas. One corps member who preferred to speak anonymously told us that some did not receive the training allowance and that they spent between 1,000 and 2,000 naira out of pocket to get to primary schools where they were camped last Friday. We note that some states cleared payments for training allowances, but several states, such as Enugu and Rivers States, are still lagging behind. Besides, ad hoc staff expressed dissatisfaction with working conditions. We are also deeply worried about the quality of some of the ad hoc staff and that this might likely constitute a challenge to the elections. We hereby implore INEC to prioritize the retraining that has been scheduled for Friday, February 22nd across the nation. That's tomorrow. Again, INEC has to ensure that they provide sufficient security for the ad hoc staff, especially the NYSC members, as most are unfamiliar with some of the areas they've been posted to, and they may be susceptible to attacks and harassment. In the end, INEC needs to, as a matter of necessity and urgency, avoid any delays in paying allowances and ensure that working conditions are safe and comfortable for the ad hoc staff, because if left unaddressed, these issues could lead to shortage of election staff if those deployed begin to boycott their duties. On the redeployment of police commissioners, which is equally important, we note the move on the 9th of February, where the Nigerian police announced the redeployment of police commissioners across the 36 states of the Federation. It is, however, unfortunate to note that less than 2 weeks after the redeployment, the Commissioner of Police for Akwa Ibom State, Bashir Makama, is being replaced by the Sokoto Commissioner for Police, Ibrahim Kauje. In the same vein, the Deputy Commissioner of Police previously deployed to Zamfara, Mr. Balarabe Sule, has been redeployed once again to Kano for the election. He replaced DCP Bukar Madubiu, who served for only 1 week. Sule was the former Chief Security Officer
to Mr. Ganduje. We think these developments are worrying. I will speak to the general atmosphere for the upcoming elections. The postponement of the elections last week really affected a lot of people, particularly businesses and some voters who traveled hundreds of kilometers or even more to return to their polling units to vote. Some voters were even unaware of the postponement until they had turned up in the morning at their polling units. It's unclear to us right now whether some of those who traveled last week many kilometers are willing to repeat the journey again. These issues, in addition to the general feeling that the postponed elections were not as a result of logistics challenges, would affect the votes. So the speculation that the election will be rigged has created, from our findings, two scenarios, two kinds of opinions. A feeling of despondence on the one hand, the feeling that votes will not count. And on the other hand, in some other parts of the country, we find also a strong motivation now for some people to vote and to defend their votes. So it is also very important to note that the mood in state capitals differs from the mood in some of the more rural and outlying hinterlands. Although some INEC staff have appeared on the media on several occasions to try to build more confidence in the electorate, from the reports we have gathered from our field observers nationwide, however, as well as from our focus group sessions in some states, we can surmise that there is some sense of disaffection among voters, and in all likelihood, this could lead to apathy. We want to comment also on the political climate in Nigeria right now. From dangerous speeches, tirades against INEC, to baseless accusations, intimidation, and violence, the political atmosphere can be characterized as being tense as the elections draw near. To start with, Ifeanyi Ozuemena, chairman of the APC in Logara Umuohiagu ward in Ngo-Okpala Council area of Imo State, was reportedly shot dead after overseeing a meeting in the ward on Tuesday night. Our observers also report cases of intimidation as well as political violence in some states. For example, we received reports of politically related violence at Koran, Pan, local government area of Plateau State, involving both APC and PDP supporters. Thuggery is also a problem in Kogi State, particularly we note in Kogi Central and Kogi East divisions. In Akwa Ibom State, in Obot Akara local government area, the APC and the PDP local chapters have been engaged in a verbal war of blame following the killing of 2 people and the burning of 13 INEC vehicles conveying election materials from INEC headquarters in Uyo on Sunday. In Kwara State, 2 persons were reported to have died as a result of a violent skirmish between supporters of both major parties in Onyu local government, Ojoko, in Kwara South, during a campaign rally early this week also. When we listen to statements from the major political parties in the immediate aftermath of the postponement last week, we note that this might have affected people's confidence in the system. Both the APC and the PDP blasted INEC and raised concerns with the Commission's decision. Abubakar Atiku of PDP accused the Buhari administration of trying to disenfranchise voters to ensure that there is low voter turnout. Senator Godswill Akpabio, accused of the APC, accused the INEC officials of colluding with Akwa Ibom State Governor Udom Emmanuel to manipulate the elections. President Muhammadu Buhari, on his part, has said INEC's incompetence was unacceptable, but nothing brought much more fury than his comments at the emergency meeting of the APC caucus on Monday, when he said anybody who tries to snatch ballot boxes or engage thugs to cause disturbance would do so at the expense of his life, we quote. The PDP quickly condemned it, of course, and called the statement a direct call for jungle justice, close quote. But what does the Electoral Act 2010 say? Section 129, subsection 4 of the Electoral Act in particular addresses this matter. It reads, subsection 4, and I'm reading, any person who snatches or destroys any election material commits an offense and is liable on conviction to 24 months imprisonment. Section 128 of the same act warns that anybody who acts in a manner that disrupts the elections, quote, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a maximum fine of 500,000 naira or imprisonment for a term of 12 months or both, close quote. Section 131 further stipulates a fine of 1 million naira or imprisonment for a term of 3 years for anybody who uses force, threats, violence, or restraint at elections. On Monday, INEC backtracked from its initial position that campaigns had ended and gave political parties the opportunity to resume campaigns again. Much of the campaigns we have observed so far are largely dominated by the APC and the PDP, and the other parties do not seem to be doing much. This points out that even though this is not evenly spread across the country, with our observers reporting a few campaigns, mostly via the radio and television, and only in a handful of states. Before we end the situation report, we have to talk about security. On the day the election was postponed, and I'll start by talking about Boko Haram in this scenario. Now, on the day the election was postponed, that's last Saturday, Boko Haram militants attacked in Buniyadi, in Gushba local government of Yobe State. This attack has further raised speculations and fear among citizens that elections may not hold in the local government. It may be recalled that Gushba was one of the affected local governments in the 2015 local general elections. Further interrogation by us reveals that even INEC is only requesting its personnel to report only on Friday the 22nd for them to know the state. Boko Haram has also conducted attacks since the postponed elections. The first in Borno was the attack in Maiduguri at the Maiduguri Mosque, followed by the killing of loggers in the forest 10 kilometers from Maiduguri. The level of insecurity in the country generally is impacting on the deployment of officials for both.
My name is Friday, I'm a reporter with Units-Cdd. I need to take the position of CDD on two issues. You agree that after the postponement last week, it actually exposes some inefficiencies on the side of INEC. Before the postponement, all of us were confident, based on what INEC was saying, that they were prepared for the elections. But we saw some inefficiencies. Now, the lapses or the gaps that are still existing that you have noted while you were briefing, will you stay on the side of those who are still insisting, because on Monday, one observer group still insisted that if INEC need more time, they should postpone the election for a second time. So what's your stance on that? Then the second one has to do with the several calls that have come in after the president's statement at the caucus meeting. And also yesterday, the chief of army staff said he would obey the president's statement. He will obey the president's order. Nobody else knows exactly which order he was referring to. But that was his statement yesterday. So my question is, would you be on the side of those who actually advocated that the army precisely should go back to barracks as far as the election is concerned? Or, in the light of what you said regarding security restructuring, as far as the election is concerned, you mentioned some states, would you say that the army should participate in any way in the elections? Thank you.
On that has consistently been that the military have no basis to be a part of the elections. And we only recognize situations like in the Northeast, in the IDP camps, where they are already deployed. They are there, they are doing their duties before the elections. So in such circumstances, we cannot ask that they should be removed from where they are already primarily located in the northeastern states of Borno in particular. But elsewhere, in the elections, they have no responsibilities to be there. And this is actually a very important issue for these elections. And this is one of the issues also driving the elections. What we noted in all the 36 states, our first level work was speaking to our observers. After our observers, our experts having meetings, doing IDIs, personally again, yesterday, we made calls around to all our coordinators to be certain, aside from what we are getting from the field, from people deployed. And we remain insistent and certain on the fact that the morale of the Nigerian voter is very, very low, extremely low in these elections. And when you then when you heighten security, when you start talking about securitization of elections, our previous works have shown us that it differs from geopolitical zone to geopolitical zone, state to state. Already there is no incentive to participate in the elections. Our work, if you look around, has shown us that the last elections, we had just 42.4% voter turnout during the 2015 elections. As at 1999 elections, we have over 52% voter turnout. Then the 2003 elections was when we had the highest voter turnout since the return to democracy, which still hovered around 63%. So there is a progressive decline in voter turnout. We then add that, we then talk in terms of securitizing elections, aside from the drums of war, which is actually being beaten by the parties involved in these elections. And people are talking about conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. The challenge we are facing in these elections, like the professors have explained, is not something that is new in our in the history of the country. But our findings have shown that the way they have instrumentalized fake news and disinformation, that is what is affecting what is happening on ground. That is why these different conspiracy theories are selling. So we remain insistent on the fact that security, in particular the military, should not be a part of the elections, except where they are previously deployed in the 3 states suffering from insurgency. One. Then secondly, we are also very insistent that there is nothing like capital punishment when it comes to electoral offenses. The laws are quite clear. As at yesterday, we had published a fact check to speak about this. And you will see that in our report, in our briefing today, we have also copiously cited provisions of the law to further buttress the fact that electoral offenders are either liable to 2 years, 500,000, a maximum of 3 years. And even if they are tried under the penal or the criminal code, there is nothing that suggests shooting on sight or anything. It even goes against the rules of engagement. These different security agencies have all had their officers adhered to, aside from international conventions itself. Then I think on INEC postponing the elections, I'll give that to Prof, but with prevailing voter apathy, don't.
Thank you. I think elections will hold on Saturday. I'm not predicting, but my thinking is that, because I don't have all the facts, no matter how closely you look, But reading and looking at the broad picture that's emerging, my own feeling is that elections will hold. Whether they will be unproblematic or may lead to other consequences, I don't know. But I think elections will hold. And you see, let me just put it that way. No, you want to speak?
Yes,
I want to come back to one or two issues later.
Just one.
Gentlemen of the press, I think the press has a very crucial role to play in any election here. And it doesn't appear as if some of the news media organizations have actually observed what they are, stay tuned to what their responsibility should be. In a volatile society like Nigeria, I don't think the press will be doing or conducting its own assignment in a very responsible way if they actually heighten the extent to which there is violence, agitation, or even encouraging certain significant certain stakeholders to resort to violence. And one thing in particular which I think we should the press should look at is, first of all, if you look at the content of the adverts that politicians bring to your studio or your newsroom, examine it critically whether it is going to serve the interests of the country or is going to destroy that interest of the country. I think that the role of the press should not be discounted in how peaceful, free, fair, and credible election can take place in this country. But if we choose, as some people have chosen, in some media houses, to find the embers of ethnicity, religious animosity, and what have you, then of course we are not doing good service or rendering good service to this country. I think the press has the responsibility to choose first and foremost the country. The Nigerian nation state is more important than any other politician or any political party. If Nigeria does not exist, probably the kind of picture we have about the nature of Nigerian politics will be slightly or definitely different from what we have at the moment. So I am appealing to gentlemen of the press to ensure that during this election and in subsequent elections, because after 2 weeks from Saturday, we are going to have the gubernatorial election. Issues should actually predominate on the pages of the newspapers, analysis that come out from media houses, instead of how one warlord group will have to take advantage of the other. I don't think the press in that instance will be doing what is required of it. Thank you.
For On Duty TV, I'd like to ask you about the core members, their welfare, if they are exposed to financial hardship. Wouldn't it make them vulnerable to, monies from politicians and the like? What would be your recommendation if you have the opportunity to present their case before INEC? What would it be?
One is that with regard to the National Youth Service Corps members. Okay. The report of the WISE Election Reform Committee makes very useful suggestions about in fact, they recommended using corps members instead of using the traditional teachers and so on and so forth, just to make sure about that they are not being used, manipulated, being civil servants and so on and so forth. So it made that. But problems have arisen that have to do, in my view, substantially with corruption of the process. Money is given out, provide certain things, they are not provided. And that's an issue that we need to look at. Now, another point I want to make is with respect to the Electoral Reform Committee report. Every day I am saddened when I see how the power of incumbency is being used to gain political advantage. And we are not talking. governors, parliamentarians are using government vehicles to campaign. They go to campaign, and they are followed with a troop of people. And we just don't see anything about this. It is wrong, because they are candidates. In fact, in some countries, although that also has its own in some countries, in fact, about 6 months or so before elections, the Electoral Commission takes over, including deployment of military personnel for elections. Because there is an inbuilt conflict of interest involved in that. Is the governor speaking as a governor or speaking as a candidate? Using and I think in other places, so there is a serious issue of political culture here in terms of doing this. And the language itself, I've had occasion to say before that we should be able to temper the language, our political rhetoric. Because what you mean is one thing, the perception of what you mean or what you intend them to do is something else. So we start quibbling over words. But this is not the words that we are quibbling over, it is the perception of those who are hearing it. When King Richard, that's my good example, says, go and get rid of my enemy. Shakespeare's King Richard II, go and we have killed your enemies. I didn't tell you to kill my enemy. So the question of perception is very, very important. It's not just whether it is legal. There is also the spirit of the law. A lawyer comes and starts reading Constitution that says, these are the circumstances when you can take a life. What about, that is not what is the spirit that is important? And is this an occasion where you can say you can now invoke that? But the important point is that there is a connotative aspect to language. And once you throw it out, you are no longer in control of how people are going to react to it. We know in this country some years back, elections, I think to the elections, somebody said something, and the whole North was almost in flames because they thought the election had been hijacked. So I think it's important that we address this issue of power of incumbency to create problems for the political system. I keep telling people this. It is wrong for governors, it is wrong for parliament to use government vehicles to campaign for elections. And it's against the law. It's against the spirit of the law. But we don't talk about that. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll give it to
Jacob Halisa.
Okay, very quickly, just in a summary, can you tell us what you feel, how you feel the coppers should be taken care of to avoid them being manipulated?
Okay. Well, certainly we feel that so far the treatment and the preparations and the remuneration for the youth corps members has not gone as they should have. And I think before we talk about how that predisposes the corpers to all kinds of inducement, we should also note what we said at the press briefing, that in the first place, the reason why the corpers are being treated this way is because some people dropped the ball, it's because there's some corruption in the system, and it's because some people have not basically carried out their responsibilities. These young people are patriotic Nigerians. For many of them, it's the first time that they are being called upon to give back to their country, and that experience is going to stay with them forever. And so we have recommended that the materials for the corps members to work with should be at their posts, and not just that, their training allowances that should have been paid must be paid immediately, and not just that whatever arrangements have been made for their accommodation, for their feeding, and just basically for their welfare and for their security and protection should be made known very quickly. And Nigerians are watching, and they really are interested. These are our brothers, our sisters, our children, and I think it concerns all of us.
Okay, so what are your goodwill messages in a nutshell for the forthcoming election in a few days' time?
As a Nigerian like everyone else, I sincerely hope and wish, and we're looking forward to to successful elections, not just this Saturday, but in 2 weeks in the various states also.
Thank you very much. My name is Toyin. I report for On Duty TV. May I meet you, ma'am?
Yes, I'm Idayat Hassan. I'm the director of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD.
Okay, very quickly, what is your goodwill message?
I think basically the message in these elections is that Nigerians should not be deterred by the postponement and unfolding political events. They should go out and participate in these elections. Elections are our right, and we have to vote, and our vote must also count. And we determine our future by casting these votes in these elections. The future of the country is being decided from this Saturday. So let's decide okay and right.
Okay, you said the morale of people are really low. What do you think they should do?
They have to forget about morale. In these elections, we have to leave aside our disappointment. We have to forget what our personal, what our fears really are. And we have to start seeing elections as the determination of our future, as our water, as electricity, as security for us. Once we start thinking about elections as our everyday, what we get in our everyday life, then our morale cannot actually be dampened in elections.
Thank you very much.